Hello everyone. In a previous tutorial, we've talked about libraries and the role they play in enriching our analyses, because in many cases we simply lack subject matter expertise in a certain domain, and libraries simply help us solve that issue. For example, we have the NumPy library, which contains a lot of mathematical functions under which there are sophisticated algorithms that were simply written by mathematicians probably. So it's very hard for us to write these functions from scratch. So what we simply do is that we tap into this already written library and integrate it into our projects or analyses in order to do something with them, right? And in this series, we will be working mainly with the Pandas library and the Matplotlib library. And unfortunately, these libraries do not come by default with the Python installation. So we need to install those in our system and then use them in our projects. All right. So to do that, we use a special software called pip, which is a package installer for Python, right? So there are thousands of libraries or packages programmed or developed particularly for the Python language, and we can use pip in order to install the libraries that we are interested in a specific project. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to make sure that the pip tool is installed on our machine so that we can use it to install the libraries. And for that, we can use this simple command in our command line in case we are using a Windows system, and using our terminal in case we are using a Mac OS system. So we simply use this command pym pip version, which we are going to use in a minute. Now, to install a particular package, we simply use the command pip install and then the name of the library. So to install pandas, we say pip install pandas. To install numpy, we say pip install numpy, and so on and so forth. Uh, Before we get into Visual Studio Code and see how we can use these commands, let's talk about one more simple topic, which is Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebook is simply a web application to write code, narrative text, and to display visualizations, right? So from now on, especially when using Pandas and Matplotlib, we are not going to use the default Visual Studio Code workspace to create our programs or analyses. We would be use notebooks, which are formatted using cells or separate cells. And we are going to take a look at those in a minute. But first, as we mentioned, let's try or let's check if pip is installed on our system. So we go to our command line tool and we write the command pym pip and then version. As you can see, pip is actually installed and the version is 19.2.3 and it's located in this path. So users update local problems Python, etc., etc. Right? And you can actually manually navigate through this whole file path to see that pip is located in there. Okay. Now that we have it installed, let's try to install the pandas library. So we say pip install pandas. As we can see, because I have pandas already installed, we can say that the requirement is already satisfied. Let's try the NumPy library. NumPy library. The same thing for NumPy. The requirement is already installed. Now, let's move on to Visual Studio Code here and try to import pandas, for example. So we say import pandas and use a specific alias like PD, and then run this cell. As you can see, it ran without any issues. But let's try to import a library that wasn't installed using the pip command. So let's import the requests library. Import requests as rec, for example. As you can see, we get the error, no module named request were found. So what we can do is we can go back to our command line and say pip install requests. And the download and installation process began. All right. Now here, as we can see, this is a Jupyter notebook document, which comes with the extension IPYMB. So it's not a Python file anymore. It's a notebook file, IPYMB. But the language we are going to use to write the different programs or analyses is still Python. All right. So to use these notebooks, we need to install the extension Jupyter by going here and type Jupyter. Do a quick search, and here it is. Jupyter developed by Microsoft, so we simply install it. In my case, it's already installed, so we can tap into it right on. So to create a new notebook, we simply say a new file, and then select Jupyter Notebook. Keep in mind that after installing the extension, make sure to restart your Visual Studio Code or close it and reopen it. All right. So let's delete this empty one and go back here. All right. Now let's delete these cells and see the main features of Jupyter Notebooks and how we can use them. So here in this case, we did a few imports for the pandas library NumPy and matplotlib pyplot, all of which do not come installed by default with Python. So I already installed them using pip. And if we run all of these, we can see that there are no issues. So the next cell here, as we mentioned before, we can use Jupyter Notebooks to create narrative text or simply text that explains your thought process or documentation when you write code to be seen by others, for example. So this is a normal cell with normal comments, normal Python comments, right? But we can change uh, the format of these comments into Markdown in order to make it more presentable or understandable. So we select change cell to Markdown, and as you can see now, the format of the paragraphs and text changed to be more presentable. Right? This is one feature. Another feature is that we can use notebooks to display visualization. So using the normal Python file or code, in VS Code, we can't see those visualizations, right? But in Jupyter, we can. So in this cell, we have used the matplotlib library to create a very simple line chart. And as you can see, after running this cell in a new separate cell, this is a completely separate cell, this visualization was generated for us. So again, we can see visualizations here. And we can finally, as expected, write down some normal live code in a cell, right? We can create variables, we can use functions, you can do whatever we want using the Python language, just like we did in previous tutorials. Now, time for the most important feature of using notebooks, which is the fact that we don't need, or we simply can segment our code into different cells so that we don't need to repeat the same operations over and over again needlessly, right? So let's assume in one cell I have made a particular operation or a task, and it took 5 or 10 minutes to run, right? And then we store the results in a specific variable. Now, what we can do is that we can create a new cell, take that output or variable, and then do something with it, rather than repeating the same operation over and over again, which took 10 minutes in the past, right? So let's take an example here. In this cell, I have created a new variable and I stored a list of 1,000 items from 0 to 999. And then I created a new empty list. And then I looped through this new list, all right? And at each time, I created a temporary variable, took one item from the list and multiplied it by 2. Now we take the multiplied item and we append it to the new list, right? So what we expect is to find a new list with the 1,000 items where each number is multiplied by 2, all right? Now, let's suppose that after appending all the items, I wanted to print out the list just to see the results. Now, would it be wise to come here and say print a new list? It wouldn't be. Why? Because in order for the print to happen, Python will actually repeat this whole operation, all right, and then print out the new list. Alternatively, what we can do, right, is to create a new cell and simply print my new list. So let's execute this operation only once and then print the list here. As we can see, we have all of our multiplied items here. So this is the most important core feature of using Jupyter Notebooks, which is that we can divide our code into different segments to avoid repeating the same operations over and over again, because in the different analyses we will be processing large amounts of data, and in certain cases we will be training different machine learning models, and these operations can consume a lot of memory and consume uh, a lot of processing power and can take a lot of time, right? So to avoid all these problems, we segment our code into different cells and uh, execute new operations in each rather than repeating them. Okay, so again, the things or the takeaways of this tutorial is to know that the different libraries do not come by default. So we need to use the pip tool to install the extra libraries into our system and start using them in our code. All right. Second thing is to use the Jupyter web application by adding simply the extension into our VS Code, right? And to understand the different features or characteristics of Jupyter, including writing narrative text, writing live code, and creating visualizations. In the next tutorials, we will begin developing using the Pandas library, and later on we will be developing or creating different visualizations using the Matplotlib library. So make sure that you have both of these Pandas and Matplotlib installed in your system. Okay, that was it, and I will see you next time. Thank you.